This is the session I've looked forward to all week for 100 reasons, because I'm really, really grateful to you, Casey, for coming. It's been quite a year for Casey. A return to Arsenal in January. England have qualified for the World Cup finals in Canada next year. And with your partner, you're expecting twins in November. So I think that's all worthy of congratulation. She's got the job of parenthood then, allied with your duties as the first woman on the PFA Management Committee, and then the job of helping England to do significantly better, perhaps in the World Cup next
we hope.
Year than a certain team did in Brazil this year. But anyway, I'm really, as I say, delighted to welcome you. Let's go back to the start. Let's talk about your first memory of football.
I grew up in a town in Essex.
So you're an Essex girl?
I am an Essex girl, proud as well, despite Towie. And ever since I can remember, I could always play, sort of 3, 4 years old, out in the back garden, out in the street. We lived in a cul-de-sac, so it was very much jumpers down for goals. The only structured football that was around in that town was a boys' team. And unfortunately, I was never allowed to play in that team because...
By the FA?
No, it was actually by the manager who didn't want a girl in his team at that point, because I was about 6 or 7. Probably a little bit too young.
Did you go to him, or did a member of the family go and say, Casey wants to play in your team?
Not at that point. I think because I was quite young at that point, they were just happy for me to kind of play along in the street and do what I was doing. It wasn't until my mum and dad split up, got divorced, and we moved to sort of South London, Morden area, and that's when Mum said, right, I'm going to get you in a team. And that was probably more because she was sick of me breaking the pot plants in the back garden and having to wash the windows from all the ball marks, and she knew that I loved it and I had a talent, and she sort of wanted to encourage it, so she took me down to the local team. Unbeknown to me, there wasn't a single girl there. It was a boys' team.
What's it called?
It was called Tolworth Boys at the time, and we played 11-a-side back then, even at sort of 10 years old. And I wasn't the only girl in the team, I was the only girl in the entire league.
The team was called Tolworth Boys?
Yeah, Tolworth Boys, Tolworth Boys FC. Obviously, I was a girl. Yeah. And it was called a boys' league as well, funnily enough, but I was the only girl that played in it. Which actually did us a favour, because they normally wouldn't mark me for the first 10 minutes and we'd end up sort of 1 or 2-0 up.
And so how did the other boys regard all this?
To be honest with you, at first it was difficult. I remember walking in, and I've got long hair now, but I had even longer hair back then, down to my bum, and I walked in and they looked at me like I had 2 heads. And I remember the session being about an hour and a half long, and for the first 20 minutes I didn't touch the ball. And I am quite resilient, so I decided to sort of roll my sleeves up and wait till the biggest one got the ball, and I smashed him up against the wall, nicked the ball, stuck it in the back of the net, and then for the next hour and a half they passed to me loads, and they got talking to me. Yeah, the thing in the environment that I've lived in and worked in, you have to earn respect, and by doing that you either show your knowledge or you show that you're good at the game.
And at home, and that will obviously come to that, but how interesting it was that was what you were fighting in those days. Oh,
absolutely, yeah. It was home life for me growing up was quite a tough period. Mum and Dad split up. My dad was a gambler, compulsive gamblers. We didn't have a lot of money. We could never afford new boots. We went to school with sort of holes in our shoes and stuff like that. So football for me was something where I went and I felt an equal and I could just play. It didn't really matter what I was wearing or what I was doing. I could just go and enjoy myself.
So how often did you play? Were you able to play?
Every day, as much as I could, out in the garden, over the park. I had a brother, so, and he was bigger than me, which actually has done me a favour being a centre-half, because he used to push me over all the time. But we used to go over the park all the time, and if there was any boys over there, we'd just grab them and say, do you want a game? And at school I played. I absolutely loved playing at school, played in the 5-a-side team up until I was 11.
Was that boys?
That was boys as well, and used to play out in the playground. Unfortunately, when I got to 11,
were you the only girl?
Pretty much, yeah. There were a couple of other girls that were interested, but they were too intimidated to play with the boys, and I didn't really care, so I just used to get involved.
And then at 11, you're meant to play girls' football, yes?
Yeah.
And so how was that transition?
It was hard because I love playing with the boys, and I didn't have a realisation that I couldn't continue. I played for that boys team for one season, got Players Player of the Year at the end of the season, scored quite a few goals for them, loved playing with them, and then the manager was like, well, you're not allowed to play with us next year. And I was like, what? And I was still one of the better players, physically still more than capable, but because of the rules, I wasn't allowed to play, so I had to stop playing at school, I had to stop playing for the club, and I had to find another opportunity. Fortunately, girls' football was on the up, and there was a little league that started around the corner. And I've got to be honest, I played there for a whole season, and it wasn't challenging me. I scored 108 goals in one season.
Right. Yeah, 108.
Yeah, I've gone back since then though. So, but yeah, it was an opportunity for me to play, but it wasn't really where I wanted to be. I wanted to play with the boys at that age.
So tell us about. I mean, so now you're in a girls' football club, and it has one team?
Yeah, one team. I think we played 9-a-side football. There was about 8 teams in the league, so there was quite a few girls playing. A lot of my friends from the local school. Not a lot of them played competitively and didn't really want to play to win. They just played because their mates played and they enjoyed it, which was great. But for me, I couldn't understand that. I was a winner. I wanted to win. So when people are like, oh, it doesn't matter if we lose, I'm like, what? Of course it matters. That's the only reason I play, is I play to win. So, but fortunately for me, we won everything. So, but halfway through the season, I was getting frustrated because I'd take the goal kicks, I'd have to try and run after them. I'd take corners, I'd try and there's sort of 7 girls all kicking at my feet and trying to take the ball off me, and it wasn't really where I wanted to be. But fortunately, a guy had come over to watch. Just to see if there was any young girls that were any good, and he happened to run the Chelsea ladies side at the time.
So that's how you got a breakthrough?
I got a break. I was 12 at the time, and he sort of come over and spoke to me and said, right, we'd love you to come and play. But they didn't have a junior team. So I went training, and it was a bit of a shock to me when I turned up, and everybody was about 10 years older than me. We had to doctor my date of birth on the registration forms, because you're not supposed to play until you're 14.
Yeah, I was chief executive of the FA at that time, yeah. All right. Good job you didn't tell me. I would have denied it, of course. So was it, there you are, and you're playing for Chelsea ladies, but at some point, how old were you?
I was 12 at the time when I started playing for Chelsea.
And so, but you say everybody else was older than you. At what point are you able to play for Chelsea? What age?
I played at 12 because we changed my date of birth on the registration forms.
To what?
To 15, so that I could play. I was quite tall, so I could get away with it, and I could look after myself physically. I was more than able to go.
I'd like to announce an FA amnesty for Casey Stoney this morning. There we are. I've done it. I'll be told off as well. Do you? How do you see women's football? I always, I happen to have 2 daughters, and I always thought this is a great game for my daughters. But providing, and my elder daughter particularly used to come to men's matches with me really from a young age, she said to me from quite a young age, actually, Dad, it's a different game for women than for men. Do you think it's a different game in any way?
No. I coach as well, and I'll always coach players as players, and I think the game is the game. Yes, it's slightly different in terms of if you watch men's and women's tennis, it's it's a different. Maybe there's more rallies and stuff in women's tennis compared to men's. It's obviously serve and volley. Women's game is never going to be as quick as the men's game because we're not built the same. Technically the same, I would say. Tactically we're as knowledgeable, and actually, I've actually coached men and women, and women tend to listen a hell of a lot more and try and do exactly.
There's a surprise.
Yeah, and tend to do exactly what you say, which sometimes is a negative as well because they'll do it to the letter. But the game is the game, and I've always said that I love playing football because it's a fantastic game. It's on the up, it's growing. I think it's as strong as it's ever been in this country. My mum, when growing up, was like, oh, you need to get a job, you need to get a career. Women's football's never going to give you a career. Well, that's not true anymore. I play football for a living.
That's what I wanted to get to. When was the moment you thought, hey, I might be able to earn a living from this?
Probably about 5 years ago. when the FA brought in the central contracts. When I initially started playing for Chelsea, like I say, we were quite poor growing up. I couldn't afford subs, and I had to pay subs even at Chelsea Football Club. It was £8 a week, I think, back then. And when you can't even afford school shoes, my mum was struggling to survive, struggling to put food on the table. She couldn't justify £8 a week to go and play football. Fortunately for me, the manager obviously saw something in me that he believed I had potential, and he made sure that I could play for nothing. And it wasn't until I joined Arsenal, probably at the age of 16, where I actually stopped paying to play. We didn't get paid, but I didn't have to pay to play either.
Is it right that when you went to Arsenal, you earned a few bob by doing the men's laundry?
I did. That's a highlight of my career.
So who were the men's players whose laundry you did?
It was just before the Invincibles time. So they had a pretty special team. I worked in the laundrette at the men's club during the mornings and afternoons, just making sure their kit was ready for their training sessions, and I trained in the evenings with the women's team.
So when I see my friend Tony Adams next week, I can say I met the woman who made sure you looked half respectable.
Absolutely.
When you came on the pitch. Fantastic. I shall tell him with glee. Do you now, though, when you look back on that period, there was a point at which you said, I can earn, my life is going to be effectively professional football?
Yeah, I'd say the turning point for me was 2009. I'd gone through, obviously, having a full-time job. I was actually working 6 days a week, most weeks, to try and get enough time off to go away with England. And in 2009, I decided that actually there's a tipping point here. I need to probably get a job that's stable. And I went to apply for the fire service. And I went through all the medicals, went through all the tests. I had loads of applicants, and I was successful. And we went to 2009 European Championships, and 2 days before we played the European Championship final against Germany, I got a phone call to get my start date for the fire. And it was due to be October the 3rd or something. 2 days later, we played Germany. Unfortunately, we lost. But I had a silver medal from a European Championship, which I'm very, very proud of. And I sat down after that tournament, had a really long conversation with my dad. And my dad's like, do you know what? You can have 30 years of working when you finish playing. You've got the opportunity potentially to be part of an Olympics, because there was rumours of that happening at the time. You've got a 2011 World Cup happening. Why would you want to miss out on that? Because actually, if you go into the fire service and you get a station manager that doesn't like women's football, he's not going to give you the time off. So that was a tipping point for me. And fortunately, the FA then brought out central contracts, which meant that I could work part-time for Chelsea, train as much as I could, and start earning a living out of the game. Talk
about earning a living. I was talking to one of your colleagues on Sunday on a radio programme, Leanne Sanderson, and we were contrasting what you guys earn and what women tennis players earn. I mean, women tennis players, thanks to the likes of Billie Jean King, have equality of prize money and all the rest of it. Do you resent that? How do you regard it?
I think it's all relative. At the moment, I don't think we can justify the wages that the men earn, because obviously they get 40,000, 50,000 coming through the turnstiles every week. Until we get to a point where we've got more people coming through the gates, then we can justify a bigger earning capacity for the women. Obviously, our central contract started off on £16,000 a year, and they haven't risen a huge amount from that. But now we've got club contracts. Clubs are actually paying money, a little bit of money as well. So with your central contract and your club contract, you can afford not to work.
Some of your colleagues have gone abroad, of course. Are they significantly better paid by playing in America, for example? I wouldn't say so,
but I would say the American national team players for the women are, some of them earn a very, very healthy wage. They might not ever have to work again, and that's through endorsements and sponsorship and stuff like that as well. So, I just feel that I feel commercial partners are missing an opportunity and not buying into the women's game in this country, because it is growing. There's so many more young girls playing out there. I think the girls in the women's game are fantastic role models and a great advert for sport.
Is the problem with women's football, or is the problem with women's sport?
Women's sport, if you read the stat that only 2% of any media coverage is targeted at female sport.
That's because it's run by men, don't you think?
It would be an assumption. Yes, I would say so.
Let me help you with it. That's why I've always thought that.
I think it's a shame, because You know, you've got so many fantastic, strong, athletic women doing great things, and unfortunately, unless you've got a tiny skirt on or a sports bra, you don't get in the papers. Why shouldn't you be in the papers for what you do rather than what you look like?
Do you really think it's as bad as that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Do you think your view is widely held?
I think so, yeah, and I think it's like I say, unless that changes, and it changes, and that comes from putting more women in higher positions across the world in different, you know, different roles, different responsibilities, then you'll get, I think, more equality that way.
You spoke out quite openly earlier this year about your sexuality. How did that come about, and why did it come about?
I obviously do a monthly column for the BBC Sport, and it was the person who ghostwrites that for me said, "Oh, we need to do a column on this," and he asked me to do it about 2 years ago, and at that point I didn't feel ready. We were preparing for a major tournament as well, and in my head the response could have been very negative. I didn't want anything to affect our preparations as a team, or for me as an individual, as England captain at that time, moving forward, to affect anything. He came to me a year later and he said, "Isn't it about time we did that column?" And I'm in a relationship where I felt comfortable. I was planning on having a family, and also I'd recently watched horrific programs on Channel 4 about people that got hunted for being gay in Russia. I'd read about a young boy's suicide at 15 because he was getting bullied because he was gay, and I thought it's about time I kind of stood up and took responsibility. You know, I was England captain at the time, and I felt like it was a time that I might be able to support and help and encourage other people in similar situations to me, because it's a very personal thing coming out. You have to be in a good place to be able to do it. And to be honest with you, I've never looked back since.
And what has been the reaction? Firstly, from the public, from other players?
Within the women's game, I think it was common knowledge that I was gay.
Yeah.
I've never kept it a secret. My family have always known. The people that matter to me always knew. Obviously, from the public, it was overwhelmingly positive. I had thousands and thousands of thank you messages to people that are saying thank you for you know, coming out and being a role model and raising the issue, from parents that have said that it's enabled their children to go and speak to them about stuff they might not have been able to before. I've had a couple of negatives, but
Sure.
You're going to get that, and that for me is about educating people.
Where do you get those negatives from? Social media and all that?
Social media. A couple of people have said some stuff in the stands when I've been playing. Fortunately, I haven't really heard them, so it's just been, you know, passed on to me. But I always say that's their issue. You know, if they're going to be like that, it's not my problem, it's theirs.
And the club has been supportive?
Oh, massively. Yeah, Arsenal have been a fantastic club. Backed me all the way. I've had emails from the chairman, Ivan, who's, you know, invited me along to games to say, you know, thank you for being such an amazing presence at the club.
And the family? People around you?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They were the first. Is this meant to be a surprise? You know, it was kind of. But no, they were brilliant. They're really supportive, and you know, if they have any negatives, then you know that they're quite able and willing to cope with it.
And the impact on your career, you would say, has been positive?
I think I've been playing the best football I've played in a long time, to be honest. You know, I'm scoring more goals than I have since I was probably about 12, and you know, I feel like I'm comfortable with myself, and I'm going out there and just playing.
The inevitable question that comes, and you know, I can remember discussing it a decade ago inside the FA. Why do men find it? I mean, one assumes there are gay men playing football in this country.
If you look at the statistics, it would be beggars' belief that there's no gay players out of the 5,000 players.
So do you think the problem for them is purely, you know, the reaction of the crowd, or do you think it's bigger than that, it's closer to home than that, reaction of other players, etc.?
I think there's probably a bit of everything. I think a male dressing room is very different than a female dressing room. I think terraces in male games is very different than terraces in female games. And obviously there was a study done recently by YouGov that 7 out of 10 people sitting in the terraces have experienced homophobic abuse and language. So as a male player, when you've got 50,000 people sitting in the stand that want to use anything to make you play bad, I can understand their fears. I think it might take one person to make that brave step, and it could open up the floodgates for other people. But, you know, I'm in a very different position from them, and like I say, it has to be something that they're ready to do.
You're also expecting twins with your partner in November, I think.
Yes.
I think I said. I mean, is it right you will be the only mother in the England squad?
Yes, in the current England squad I would be. And obviously it's quite difficult being a parent in sport because you spend so much time away from home. But the FA have been, very supportive in trying to find solutions moving forward on, how we can bring children into the environment or support parents in that environment so that they're not away and not missing the children for too long.
So let's look ahead now. Arsenal and ladies.
Yep.
Again, as ever, expecting to win something, one or two things this year.
Yeah, we obviously won the FA Cup in May. We didn't have a great start to the season, I've got to be honest. We lost 9 of the starting 11 that were there last year. I obviously joined as a new player again. Massive transition period. We didn't start very well. We had quite a few key players out injured as well. But we still managed to win the FA Cup. We've come back after the break. We've had a really fine run of form. We're now in the Continental Cup final. We're trying to climb up the league. If we could finish third and win 2 cups, I'd say after the start we had, I'd say that was quite a successful season.
You talk about the season, moving women's football to the summer. I mean, what's been the practical impact on you?
I don't have to wear gloves anymore, which is really good. I think in terms of audiences, not trying to compete too much with the men's game, we've seen attendances rise this year. I think in the first month they rose over 100%. So it just shows you that people will come out more in the summer. You're not competing with the men's game as much. The only difficulty is struggling for pitches and finding pitch space and making sure you've got the quality of pitches in the summer. So, I suppose that was a barrier to overcome, but I think we've managed that now. Obviously, BT Sport have taken the game as well and showed. I think they've shown 3 games in the last week, so it just shows you, it is moving forward.
And when you set out, could you have imagined what's been achieved?
No, I look back with so much immense pride now to have been, part of this movement, part of moving the game forward. I'm going to look back in 20 years' time and probably be really jealous because the girls will be earning a decent wage, which is what they deserve to be earning. And, to be part of that is fantastic. I never set out to be part of that. I think to be a professional footballer and to go into, I go into schools all the time and talk to young people and I say, you can be a young professional footballer now. That wasn't possible when I was a young girl, and now girls can have it as a career.
What was it like to take part in the Olympics? Because that's close to the hearts of certain of us who fought a battle over it. And did you, to get a women's team, a Great Britain women's team, into that Olympic Games, what was it? What's it like to play in front of 70,000 people at Wembley?
Every time I talk about it, to say it makes my hair stand up is not an understatement. It was the most life-changing in terms of memories and experience that I could ever have in my life. And to captain that team and to be able to walk out at Wembley on that night in front of over 70,000 people, beat Brazil on our home turf, and just be part of that Olympic experience was... You can't replicate it, and for me it's memories that will stay with me forever. And I think that strengthened me as a player, the experience, and playing under that pressure as well was fantastic.
But of course the England team is going to play Germany now at Wembley in November?
Yes, November the 23rd. First time we've ever had a friendly actually at Wembley, this Wembley anyway. So we're really hoping that people will come down and support us. Ticket prices are so reasonable, isn't it? You can't get into Wembley for £1 normally, so the kids' ticket prices are £1, adults are £10. I think we'll put on a fantastic advert for the game. Germany are one of the best teams, if not the best team in the world. So if we can pit ourselves against them and do well, I think it'll be a great advert for the game.
And then there's a World Cup in Canada next year, which you would hope to be part of?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm fighting at the moment to stay in the squad and keep my place in the squad. I obviously had a new manager. I've gone from being England captain to being on the bench, but for me it's just another time
But you get on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
I just need to roll my sleeves up and show him what I can do. He wants to bring the younger generation through, but I'm still,
So you're the older generation,
I'm old. I'm classified as old now, yeah, so at 32. So I can keep doing what I'm doing at my club, playing well, and hopefully I'll be on that plane to Canada where I believe we can really, really do well next year.
So to sum up, do you see yourself now as a role model for other girls, other women to play football?
I suppose I would do, yeah. You're on the telly, and I actually think whether you want the status role model or not, you have a lot of responsibility with that. And with that, you know, I think you can either be a really positive one or you can be a negative one. I'd like to think that I could be a positive one. I'd like to think that girls look and go, actually, I want to be like that. I can do that. I can play football. I can be comfortable in myself in whatever way. You know, they can go and do their jobs and can turn up to training every day and play and get paid.
Well, I think you're the most fantastic role model. And I really, it's been a privilege that you've come and joined us. Will you take a few questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody got any question that you're dying to ask? Anybody's dying to ask? So, guy, gentleman here. I think we can hear you in here, so have a go.
I'm sure you can, David. Sorry, my name's Colin from Manchester FA. Casey.
Hi, Colin.
Just interested to see what your thoughts are on the division of the game, probably professional and the grassroots. It's grown immensely.
Yeah, it has. I think we've still got an awful lot of work to do from the bottom up and from the top down. You know, I'm very passionate about grassroots football because that's where we all begin. You know, not all of us make it to the top, but I believe that every girl should have the opportunity to play. And I still see too many opportunities where I'm going in, and too many experiences where I'm going into schools, and they're saying, "Oh, we've got a boys' team, we haven't got a girls' team, and we have to go and do netball or hockey." Well, actually, unless we challenge those teachers and those behaviours and say, actually, there's enough girls here to set up a team. And I always say to the girls, challenge your teachers, challenge your parents, set up a team yourself, go and play. You know, because I think every girl should have the opportunity to play. And at the top, you know, I'd love to see the game be fully professional, every team be fully professional. I'd love someone to, you know, invest in the game at the top, take it and run with it. And you know, I think it's going in the right direction. You look at Man City, for instance, professional team, very much clubbed with their men's team. Every promotional stuff, every marketing stuff they do, there's a male player standing next to a female player. And it becomes the norm. You know, and boys are looking up at marketing campaigns going, oh, there's the girl. And they're not going, girls don't play football, because they can see their idol standing next to a female player. And I think that's really, really important in having that presence up there.
Lady here, yes.
That's quite new. What do you think about the other side of the city, the Reds? They don't have...
They don't. I played in a game many years ago. It was one of Manchester United ladies' last games, actually. It's disappointing because they've got a fantastic centre of excellence that runs up to 17. Then they don't have an exit route. So I think it's really disappointing that they don't have a women's team, because in terms of social responsibility, they should do, really. And I think they could have a fantastic women's team, because Manchester United as a brand is huge. You know, if they really invested in the women's team, if they wanted to run with it, they could make it really successful. And it'd be great to have Man City, Man United derbies in the women's game too.
Grass, lady. Yep.
I just thought that was a really inspiring interview, and thanks very much, Casey, and David for hosting that. It was really interesting. I work for a charity called Coaching for Hope, and we've worked with regulating Sue Smith on supporting our approach to women's football in Africa. And what we've found really inspiring there is that giving girls in Africa a chance to play,
Sure.
coach female coaches, creates this whole role model thing that you spoke about. The girls then think that they have got an opportunity to play football, and they can be alongside the boys, and it just brings the whole kind of gender equality issue onto the forefront, if you like. So anytime you want to come out to Africa, Casey, you're very welcome.
I'd love to come.
Sounds a pretty good invitation to me.
Absolutely. Anything I could do to encourage the game anywhere, I'm more than happy to.
There's a guy at the back. Yep.
Casey, you say it would be a brave step for a male player to come out. Do you hope that as society's attitudes change, that maybe in the near future it wouldn't be such a brave step?
I hope so. I think society is changing massively. You know, I only have to look at my own experiences, and I say society has changed in this country. You know, but I watched the Commonwealth Games recently, and I think out of the 53 countries, don't quote me on it, 45 countries, it was still illegal to be gay. Now that's a worrying stat. You know, how can it be illegal to love somebody? That's a crazy thought. But society is changing. I'd love us to get to a society where it's not news anymore. You know, because it is people just leave people to live their lives. As long as they're living their lives in a positive way, who does it matter who they decide to live their lives with? You know, so yes, it would be brave. Could I see it happening? I think hopefully in the near future, yes.
I should just go back to one point that we talked about, the Olympics and the impact that the Olympics had on you. Of course, the Great Britain team came together for one Olympics. The Scots and the Welsh and the Northern Irish deigned to join with the English to take part in that Olympics after some of us had battled for however many years. And so now we're heading down to Rio de Janeiro in 2 years' time. Do you, at the moment, there is a mystery around whether, is there any chance at all that a Great Britain women's football team will take part in that Olympics? Have you got a plea to some of my successors, let alone let's get into that debate about what's going on north of the border at the moment, but do you have a plea for a Great Britain team in the Olympics?
I can't, express enough how important it is to our game. You only have to take 2012. Yes, it was a home Olympics, but irrelevant of whether it was that, it gave our game a platform that it had never had before. We got to audiences that had never seen women's football before. And actually, the excitement that got behind the women's team was absolutely incredible. We felt it. Unfortunately, I think we missed an opportunity by not going on and medaling. I think that could have done wonders for our game. But in terms of a platform, I think it's massive. If we can go next year to the World Cup and we do enough to qualify, then we need a team in Rio. Yes, I think we've got to get to the semi-finals. Are we capable of doing that? Absolutely. If we do that, we did enough in Beijing and in China in 2007 to qualify for Beijing, and we never had a team. Exactly. Another missed opportunity for our game. Sure. If we do enough in 2015 to get there, we need to have a team, because it just does so much. Little girls watching their telly, in terms of commercial and money coming into the game, it just makes it so much better for us, so we can sell our game more and we can get more money coming in, we can get more, and that money then filters down to grassroots and we can get more young girls playing at a lower level. And obviously, it's not about us becoming millionaires. It's never been about that. I'll retire at 32 and I'll probably, end up hopefully staying in the game. We're never going to earn millions from the game.
Going to coach some men?
I'd love to coach some men. Yeah, I have done in the past, and I'd like to stay in the game. I'll coach women, I'll coach men. It's football. I love the game. But having said that, it's never been about us making a huge amount of money. It's about getting more young girls playing, getting the structure of the game better so that everybody has an opportunity to play.
That's an inspiring moment in which... have you got a... OK, let's have this, you first, and then we'll come to our friend here to finish. Thank you.
Well, when I initially had the phone call to ask if I'd go on it, I've got to be honest, I sort of went back and had a few conversations as if to say, should I do this or not, because it's quite a big step. And my first meeting, I turned up, the PFA offices are just over the road, and I walked in and Gordon said, thank you for being here, you're very brave. And I was like, oh no, brave, okay. And to be honest with you, it's brilliant. I was very much one of them. We were sat around a massive table. My input was very much asked for. For us as a female sport, the PFA have been heavily involved over the last couple of years. They've improved our central contracts with the FA. They're improving the club contracts. There was things that weren't, like maternity wasn't even in contracts. Yes, women do have babies, believe it or not, and still try and play sport. And, there were so many things that they've advised us on that, that we didn't really know about. And also I'm taking issues from the women's game to the table that the men's game isn't even aware of. Little things about, maybe looking at, we have to have jobs. And they're going, right, well, how do we get jobs into the men's game? And I'm going, well, there's websites that you can create, and they can alert you when there's coaching jobs and coaching roles and stuff like that. So it's been an eye-opener for me in terms of the discussions. What I think is fantastic is everything's completely transparent within the PFA, and they're really trying to drive the women's game forward, and they can fight battles that we can't fight as players. So I think it's really good.
Hi, Casey. I'm Llewellyn Morey, writer and freelance journalist. Terrific discussion. Do you really think that one day there will be a woman playing in the men's game?
No. I don't think there will be, and I don't think there should be, in my opinion, at the Premier League level. We play games behind closed doors against men's sides, and it's the physical differences that make the huge gulf between men and women's football. So whereas technically and tactically we're exactly the same, if you're, you know, I'm probably just near 10 stone. If I'm going to go into a tackle with a 15 stone guy, there's only going to be one winner, you know, and the pace. And we're built differently for a reason. So I can't see it. If it did happen, I think it would be a PR stunt. But I think women's football is good enough on its own rights to stay on its own and be a sport that's driven. And, you know, it's a fantastic game that I'm very passionate about.
Inspirational. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
That's lovely.
So we can't